When you think of cinema, you think of the big explosions, the heartbreaks, the journeys taken by animals and people alike, and heartwarming endings that bring everyone together, or mourn those lost. And we feel connected to these stories, these characters, friends. But what about what goes on behind the scenes? Not the lights, camera, action, but the stuff that builds up to the big screen. I'm talking about script writing. Let's go through a brief history of screenwriting. Scripts today are recognised as being the written form of film and TV, with descriptions of actions, sound and dialogue. Here's a look at the script from Pulp Fiction.
We got into this thing with the best intentions, really. I never...
Oh, I'm sorry. Did I break your concentration? I didn't mean to do that. Please, continue. You were saying something about best intentions? What's the matter? Oh, you were finished. Oh, well, allow me to retort.
This is what a modern screenplay looks like. Screenwriting started around the same sort of time as movies themselves, to help directors, camera operators and others working on the moving pictures know what they're doing and how they would want the end product to look.
Say hello to my little friend!
The differences between today's scripts for cinema and when they first started are crazy. The level of detail, the added information, it all adds to create something amazing. If we look way back as early as 1897, we would find 40-second clips called scenarios. The reason that these are so different to 21st century scripts is the fact they would literally only have 2 or so sentences describing what's happening on screen. Take a look at this. 4 young ladies in their nightgowns are having a romp. One of the pillows gets torn and feathers fly all over the room. How simple is that? If we use our time machine to jump ahead to 1902, we can look at a motion picture called A Trip to the Moon, which was created by George Méliès. Its scenario was 30 lines long and included directions like loading the gun and splashing out into the open sea, which is a lot more descriptive than 4 girls having a romp. But still, today's scripts reach 100 pages and over. The beginning of the 1900s showed a lot of progress in movies and scripts. A Trip to the Moon was the first to have more than one scenario, and just a year later this turned into something called master scene format. Master scene format was different because it depicted multiple scenes for the same production. It included scene headings and more descriptions of actions. This was used behind the scenes of the Great Train Robbery. However, this didn't stick around long either, as Thomas Ince came along shortly after in 1911 and revolutionised the industry. He had approached the New York Picture Company for a job filming westerns on the West Coast. Ince introduced continuity scripts, which changed the world of film forever. These scripts contained a description of scenes, props, and internal and external settings. Even things like predicting cost and keeping it within budget were included. Shooting schedules also helped organise time. Shots and cuts were put in the detail to help directors and camera workers know what order it's going to be filmed in. This kind of screenwriting resembles today's a lot more, and you can really see the change over time leading up to this point. Sound. Sound plays a huge role in the development of cinema and scripts. In 1912, just after continuity scripts took off and were used in mainstream media, sound was introduced, and it created so many more opportunities for storytelling in film and television. Things like accents and emotions could now be considered and elaborated on. Stories could now be told through music, dialogue, and sound effects. Screenplays were becoming even more detailed and interesting. This made for a better viewing both at home and in the theatres. The first non-silent film was finally released in 1927. Once it took off, everybody was using screenplays to make their movies. The world of media became much more creative. The scenes could be pieced together to make longer, more intricate feature films with music, dialogue, and sound effects. Imagine your favourite movie with no sound. Not as great, right?
What a world!
The golden era of Hollywood film was the 1950s and 60s. Directors and screenwriters looked into the glitz and glam of the upper class, and everything was big and spectacular. Everyone in the big screen was rich, dressed in ball gowns and top hats, wore a full face of makeup and were always camera ready. This came as a breath of fresh air, as America had just come out of one of the greatest tragedies that the United States would ever have to face. But scriptwriters wanted to step away from the darkness and depression of the war. Dialogue was sculpted to be even wittier and more sophisticated, and the characters are brighter, sharper, and more exuberant than ever. The writers themselves are all well educated and able to transfer that into their work. We can look at Tennessee Williams as an example, who wrote the screenplay for the award-winning A Streetcar Named Desire. Williams had attended the University of Missouri, studying journalism, and moved on to poetry and screenwriting. A Streetcar Named Desire was immensely successful and has memorable and witty lines like,
"I thought you were straight."
Straight? What's straight? A line can be straight or a street. The heart of a human being.
Writers used dialogue that wasn't really how people spoke in real life, as they wanted to make the film really glamorous and bright.
Well, I suppose you're right in a way, Walter.
Sure, I'm right.
I am fond of you, you know.
And a girl?
I often wish you weren't such a stinker.
This time frame was referred to as the golden age of cinema because of the amazing scripts behind the work. Censorship was also relaxed, and subjects like sex, death and violence were more normalised, giving scriptwriters more freedom. What better example of sex, death and violence is there than Pulp Fiction? If you're familiar with the 1994 hit Pulp Fiction, you might be surprised to know that the script is actually incredibly short for such a long and detailed movie, and lots of dialogue is ad-libbed. Although, the success is definitely still down to the screenwriters behind the scenes. Both Quentin Tarantino and Roger Avary had won Oscars for their work. Looking at the apartment scene in particular, we can see how the writing creates literal visible building tension. The control Jules has over the situation, the characters, and his calm yet fiery attitude in this part is incredible. This is an example of amazing scriptwriting. The dialogue with its quick and witty delivery with dry humour and abruptness really gets the viewer on the edge of their seat. The rising tensions and outbursts really work together to make a beautiful bit of cinema. Even the most trivial scenes, like travelling in the car, are full of embedded information about what's going on and the characters' personal lives. Jules and Vincent are forever chatting and bickering and seem to get on well, as both friends and business partners. Their interactions are full of sarcasm, teasing, and lack of seriousness. Even just with how Vincent Vega talks about his time in France and Amsterdam shows that he is well travelled with some money behind him, and he has an interest in the world and pays attention to cultural differences. Subtext is super important. I think it's also a main character in this movie. The pair's chatting in casual disagreements about stupid things like burgers,
Royale with cheese.
heavily conflict with the outbursts that could come only moments later when they're blowing off the head of Marvin in the back seat of the car, or both threatening and killing Brett and his friends in the apartment. The ability to go easily from 0 to 100 in a split second shows the effect of good script writing, in the sense that Tarantino and Avery have so much control over what we see and hear on screen, and know exactly how to get the reaction from the audience they want. They have great power as the minds from behind the famous flick. Having looked over the development of screenwriting all the way from the start to modern times, we can only be interested in how screenwriting is going to develop in the future. Films are able to be made much more cheaply. Also, about 80% of people in both the UK and US have a smartphone with a camera which can be used to record. DSLR cameras also retail at an affordable price. It's no longer only reserved for big companies and no longer requires a huge budget. Films can be made cheaply, at home, by anyone. In fact, I'm sure you have some embarrassing movies somewhere. This opens up countless possibilities for a new generation of filmmakers who will take more risks and work in different ways. I wonder where movies will go next.